But the wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes, and that was the case here, but they got it done.
27 years after rapper Tupac Shakur was shot to death in a car in Las Vegas, a man who confessed to his involvement in the crime is behind bars.
With the recent indictment of Duane Keith Davis, a former Compton gang leader known as Keffee D, who has been saying publicly for years that he was in the white Cadillac when the fatal shots that killed rapper Tupac Shakur were fired, prosecutors have begun to map out the most detailed narrative yet of the chain of events that led to Mr. Shakur's death. In this video, we will explore the motive behind the rapper's tragic death at the age of 25 and the events that led to Keffee D's arrest. Welcome back to True Crime Capital. On September 7th, 1996, at 11:15 p.m. in Las Vegas, Tupac Shakur, a 25-year-old rapper from the United States, was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting. This happened when Tupac's car stopped at a red light at East Flamingo Road in Koval Lane. He was hit by 4 bullets fired from a .40 caliber Glock, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, and 1 in the thigh. Unfortunately, he passed away 6 days later. Now, on September 29th, 2023, which is 27 years later, Duane Keith Davis has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder in connection with Tupac Shakur's death.
Ultimately, our persistence in this investigation has paid off.
Tupac broke out as a solo artist in the early 1990s with a unique blend of introspective street poetry and young man's fury. A proud anti-hero whose popularity only grew as he became mired in violence and rivalries, Tupac transformed in death into a hip-hop icon and pop culture martyr. Not long before the Las Vegas shootout, there was a big fight at the Lakewood Mall in Southern California. This fight led to a series of revenge actions. In July 1996, Keffee D, known as the leader of a local gang called the Crips, gave $4,000 to a local football player to buy clothes before he went to college. He also told other gang members to accompany him to the mall. At the mall, the group of young Crips ran into another group called the Mob Piru Bloods, who were enemies with the Crips. They fought over a chain that belonged to the Mob Piru Bloods. This chain was really important to them. It was like taking someone's crown, a symbol of respect. Within a day, a big conflict erupted in the area, with shootings happening all over. One person named Orlando Anderson, who was known as Baby Lane, who was Keffee D's nephew, was part of the attack. Anderson and a group of Southside Crips tried to take the oh-so-important chain from Mob Piru Bloods member Trayvon Lane in a store at the mall. In September of the same year, Anderson went to Las Vegas with his uncle and other Crips for a weekend of boxing, gambling, and fun. On September 7, 1996, Tupac Shakur attended the Bruce Seldon vs. Mike Tyson boxing match with Marion Surge Knight, the head of Death Row Records, at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Nevada. The heavyweight fight ended in less than 2 minutes with a first-round Tyson knockout. Some ticket holders hadn't even made it to their seats before it was over. After leaving the match, one of Surge Knight's friends, Trayvon Lane, saw Orlando Anderson, who was from the Southside Compton Crips, in the MGM Grand lobby. The memory of the fight over the chain at the Lakewood Mall in Southern California back in July was still clear in his mind. After leaving the match, one of Surge Knight's associates, Trayvon Trey Lane, a member of the Mob Pirates, spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson from the rival Southside Compton Crips gang in the MGM Grand lobby. As those gathered plotted their next moves for the evening, Baby Lane Anderson, brushing off the need for backup, found himself alone near the MGM hotel elevators and face-to-face with Tupac and his entourage of Bloods, including Trayvon Trey Lane, the same man whose death row chain had been targeted at the mall in California. Shakur asked Anderson if he was from the South, meaning Southside Crips, and then he punched Anderson in the face, causing him to fall down. Shakur and Surge Knight's group joined in and attacked Anderson. The fight was caught by the hotel's security cameras and was eventually broken up by hotel security around 9 p.m. But when the police and hotel security arrived, Anderson didn't want to press charges, and the people who attacked him had already scattered. Now it was Anderson who wanted revenge. He didn't want to go back to Compton without doing something about it, you know? Gang style. After the fight, Shakur went back to his hotel, the Luxor Las Vegas. Shakur and Surge Knight then left in a BMW car, after changing their clothes, and went to Club 662, Keffee D, who was a successful drug dealer and a high-ranking member of the Crips at the time of Shakur's death, wrote in his 2019 memoir that on the night of the shooting, he got a Glock pistol from a drug associate from Harlem. He then teamed up with his nephew, Baby Lane Anderson, to find Shakur and Surge Knight for revenge. Keffee D and Surge Knight had been childhood friends, but their relationship soured as Death Row Records became more associated with a gang called the Bloods. Instead, Keffee D joined forces with their rivals at Bad Boy Records, a label owned by Sean Love Combs, also known by his stage names Puff Daddy, Puffy, P. Diddy, or Diddy. He was offering his Crip gang members as security for the label's artists and executives in exchange for access to concerts and parties. After a failed attempt to target Shakur and Surge Knight at Club 662, the white Cadillac that Keffee D and Baby Lane Anderson were in happened to come across Shakur's BMW by chance. They saw Shakur leaning out of the passenger side window. Keffee D wrote, "If Pac had not been hanging out of the window, we would have never seen them. Like two rams locking horns, Surge and I looked each other dead in the eye." Terrence Brown was driving the white Cadillac that night, with Keffee D in the front passenger seat, Baby Lane Anderson behind him, and another person named DeAndre Smith, also known as Big Dre, in the back. Keffee D is the only person who was in that vehicle who is still alive today. In Keffee D's book, he said that before they stopped at the traffic light, he threw the Glock gun into the back seat of the car. While he hasn't always said who shot the gun that night, he told the police in interviews about 15 years ago that it was Baby Lane Anderson who did it.
Blasting. You say Suge looks over, he sees you. He looks right at you.
Yeah, he looked at me.
Okay. When he looks over at you, and then Tupac's busy getting shot. Evidently, the story is Tupac's trying to either get out
In
of
the
the
back seat or something.
Yeah. What do you see happening inside of their
Jumping
car?
in. I seen a bullet going Suge's head. I thought he was dead.
So Orlando shot across Dre?
He leaned over on the window. We rolled down the window, popped.
Who was it?
They would drove on my side. I would have popped them. You know what I'm saying? But they was on the other side.
Right.
But now, there is new information in the case that tells a slightly different story. Some reports suggest that Mr. Smith admitted at the time that he was the one who fired the shots that killed Shakur and hurt Surge Knight. He said, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson didn't have a clear shot, so Dre asked for the gun, got it, and then fired it. After the shooting, people in Compton and other places started to believe that Baby Lane Anderson shot Tupac in revenge for the fight at the MGM. DeAndre Smith, Big Dre, let Baby Lane Anderson take the credit for it. Shakur's music and how people saw him was beginning to change after he got arrested and found guilty of sexual abuse in 1993. He started to be part of the gangster rap label called Death Row Records, and its leader, Surge Knight, paid $1.4 million to get him out of jail while he waited for his appeal. While he was still waiting for the court to decide his case, Tupac was attacked, robbed, and shot in the lobby of a recording studio in Manhattan. He blamed this attack on his former friend, the Notorious B.I.G., and people from the Bad Boy Records label in New York, including Sean Combs, who was known as Puff Daddy back then. They said they had nothing to do with it, and the song called Who Shot Ya? By Notorious B.I.G. was released shortly after Tupac's attack. He later claimed that he wrote it before Tupac was shot. In June 1996, Shakur responded to all of this with a very angry and personal song called Hit 'Em Up. This made the competition between the East Coast and West Coast hip-hop scenes turn into a big feud. Each side got support from gangs to protect themselves. As these tensions grew, people from both sides were getting ready to go to Las Vegas to watch Mike Tyson fight Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. The same fight I mentioned earlier. Los Angeles Police Department Detective Greg Carding said that Sean Puff Daddy Combs offered $1 million to have both Tupac Shakur and Surge Knight killed because of the big fight between them and Biggie Smalls and Tupac, and to clear out the East Coast and West Coast beef once and for all. It's said that the music mogul had strong gang connections in LA. He supposedly hired a Crips member head Duane Keith Keffee D Davis to carry out the hit. Remember earlier we talked about how Keffee D had problems with Surge Knight and switched sides to work with Bad Boy Records because Death Row was getting closer to the Bloods gang? Well, it's alleged that the $1 million hit happened because of the rap feud, and it's believed that he ordered the hit because he was close to Keffee D, who confirmed this claim in public. If the story about the $1 million hit is true, Keffee D used what happened in Las Vegas to avenge his nephew's attack, and at the same time fulfill Sean P. Diddy's request for the hit. Talk about killing two birds with one stone. After surviving the attack on Tupac, Suge Knight supposedly hired a member of the Bloods gang to kill the notorious B.I.G. The hitman shot and killed Biggie after he left a party thrown by Vibe magazine. It's said that Bloods member Wardell Poochie Faust killed Biggie after getting paid $13,000 by Suge Knight. According to Carding, Poochie was at the same party as Biggie and shot at his car as they were leaving. Biggie later died on the way to the hospital. The murder case was dropped because the LAPD proved they weren't involved in a conspiracy. According to Carding, the investigation was stopped even though they looked into it closely because the LAPD had won the $500 million lawsuit that Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, had filed. There's another claim that Puff Daddy never paid the $1 million, so Keffee D and his gang killed the notorious B.I.G. for not getting paid for Tupac's murder. However, this claim has not been proven. In an interview from a California state prison on October 2, 2023, Death Row Records founder Suge Knight disputed the allegation that Keffee D's nephew, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, was the one who shot Tupac in the drive-by shooting. Suge Knight, who is serving a 28-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter, said that neither he nor Tupac would tell the true story. He also stated that Orlando Anderson wasn't the shooter, and that's all he would say about it. He mentioned that he wouldn't testify against Duane Keith Davis, even though he was one of the last living witnesses to the incident and was driving the car when Tupac was shot. If Suge Knight is adamant that Orlando Anderson wasn't the shooter, could that mean that DeAndre Smith, Big Dre, is the real shooter?
There was only two people in the car. And Pac not gonna tell the story. I ain't gonna tell the story, but I tell you this. I never had nothing bad to say about Orlando because number one, he wasn't the shooter. Number two, he came to my hearing and told to let me go and tell the truth. They still didn't let me go.
Just think about it. I've noticed all the talk about whether P. Diddy might also get charged with solicitation for Tupac's murder. Right now, it looks like a situation of he said, she said. Unless there's a recording of the conversation or clear evidence that he actually paid for that $1 million hit, I don't think he'll end up in jail. But that's just what I think. What's your take on it? Las Vegas law states that when two or more people come to a mutual understanding with the intent of committing an unlawful act, they can be held liable for conspiracy charges. Even if the crime is never carried out, all involved parties are still guilty of illegal conduct. Simply agreeing to commit the said deed is enough for one's culpability. So regardless of who pulled the trigger in the Tupac Shakur'S murder, all the four men in the car are equally liable, and since Keffee D is the only person still alive, he is also the only one left to face the music. Before wrapping up this video, let us take the investigation timeline for this case. Right after the murder of Tupac happened, there was a big gang war in Compton. The police there organized a massive operation to arrest known gang members and search for the white Cadillac that was witnessed leaving the scene after the shooting. But this first investigation didn't make much progress because the police said that witnesses weren't cooperating. It wasn't until 2006 that the Los Angeles Police Department started a special team to look into the still unsolved murder of the notorious B.I.G., where the connection to Tupac Shakur's death was made. During this new inquiry, a Los Angeles detective named Mr. Kading convinced Keffee D to talk to him. He used the threat of drug trafficking charges to get Keffee D to speak. In 2008, Keffee D agreed to something called a proffer agreement. This meant that Mr. Kading promised not to charge Keffee D with anything based on what he told him about Tupac and Biggie's murder, as long as what he said was true. Mr. Kading recorded the conversation, and after he retired from the police department, he used it in a book he wrote in 2011 called Murder Rap, the untold story of the Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur murder investigations. In 2015, the recording was also used in a documentary based on the book. Keffee D got upset about Mr. Kading sharing this information. He wanted to tell his story, especially after recovering from colon cancer. So, he started talking about the case publicly. This was a risky move because even though Keffee D was protected from prosecution for what he told Mr. Kading during their meeting, his later public statements were not protected, according to legal experts. Let me say that again. Even though Keffee D was protected from prosecution for what he told Mr. Kading during their meeting, His later public statements were not protected, so it is safe to say the man dug his own grave, totally unprovoked. Keffee D gave his first public interview about Mr. Shakur's death in 2018 for a documentary series called Death Row Chronicles. He was trying to be very careful with his words so he could take credit for the murder without getting arrested, said Mike Dorsey, who worked on the documentary series Death Row Chronicles and consulted on murder rap. He mentioned that Keffee D had a lawyer with him. After the documentary series aired and didn't lead to any charges, Keffee D wrote about the case in his book Compton Street Legend. He also gave more interviews about it, including to popular YouTubers, and his statements became less controlled over time. The police and prosecutors in Las Vegas were keeping a close eye on Keffee D's interviews. Mark DiGiacomo, a prosecutor in the case, mentioned that since 2019, Keffee D had talked about the case multiple times in connection with his book, and had repeatedly admitted to being the one who ordered Tupac Shakur's death. In his book, Keffee D sometimes showed a softer side toward Tupac Shakur and his family. He wrote that he felt deeply sorry for the pain caused by Shakur's death. However, he still believed that revenge was necessary because of what happened to his nephew. He even said that for some of the Crips involved, killing Shakur earned them respect. But he also acknowledged that this brought too much attention and led to intense scrutiny from law enforcement, which eventually brought them down.
So the white Cadillac, it was 4 people in the white Cadillac. It was you, Dre, Orlando, and Terrence Brown. How did Terrence Brown pass away?
He was at a weed place, and he was a security there. And the people came and robbed, killed him and the owner.
He called it a significant loss for everyone involved. In closing, the indictment against Keffee D doesn't say who actually fired the gun. It mentions that Keffee D provided the gun to Mr. Smith and/or Mr. Anderson with the intention that they would use it for the crime. However, the former Los Angeles detective, Mr. Kading, believes that the strongest evidence points to Keffee D admitting in his interviews that he gave the gun to Orlando Anderson, who then pulled the trigger. I just want to give a shout out to Gregory James Kading, a former detective from the Los Angeles Police Department. I believe he and his task force from LAPD deserve credit for the arrest of Duane Keith Davis in 2023. If they hadn't convinced Keffee D to talk to them by threatening him with drug trafficking charges, Keffee D might not have started talking publicly about the case, and we wouldn't have the information we do now. I am looking forward to your thoughts on the case, and Keffee D arrogant self-sabotage, and what do you think of the theory between Baby Lane and Big Dre? Who do you really think pulled the trigger? If you found this video insightful, please support the channel by subscribing. Stay safe out there.